Loser.io is a service that provides remote access to player pianos through a REST API interface. Loser.io is aimed at businesses interested in optimizing their operational costs by reducing resources dedicated towards directly interfacing with piano players, tuners, movers, and technicians. To use Loser.io, one simply directs the software engineer to integrate web requests to the service into the client's existing business logic. Each request effectively uploads a new opus to the processing queue, which is then recorded by a set of internally managed player pianos in as little as 24 hours. The client system is then notified of the location of the recording through an automated mechanism. Loser.io is an attempt to make a case for defining technologies by the labors of maintenance required to use, reproduce, and recreate them. It is a proposed movement towards a theory of technology based on the lens that centers on the labors of maintenance required to sustain it. The project focuses on the design history of the piano and the current history of the piano tuning industry. Because the piano is an interesting example of a computational object, where the artificial division between user and maintainer is more blatantly physical than the more traditional instances of current-day computers. After interviewing piano tuners/restorers and doing a semester-long class on piano tuning at the New York School for Piano Tuning Service and Repair, the goal was to present my interpretations of this research in the form of an art project involving an engineering/tech stack blog for a fictional company called Loser.io, an entity that claims to automate away the piano-playing labor of the business by creating an API for a server farm of player pianos. On January 21st of 2020, I enrolled in the New York School of Piano Tuning Service and Repair under the instruction of Lou Deshati. I was introduced to many of the initial complications a beginner piano tuner student becomes aware of upon studying the seemingly simple task of tuning all the strings of a piano. Inside pianos are rigid cast iron frames bearing the collective tension of all the strings at once, where adjustment to one string affects all others. One complication is perhaps the basis for the entire craft of piano tuning. Measure a professionally tuned piano using an electronic device. The upper ends of the piano will read as sharp. The lower notes will read as flat. This is for two reasons. 1. The physicality of piano strings can never truly replicate the analytical ideals referenced by acoustic physics. And 2. The precision of human hearing is not uniform over the frequency range of the piano. Piano tuners refer to both of these complications when discussing what they call inharmonicity. The oral piano tuner always works by comparing the string they are tuning to all the strings they have previously tuned on the instrument, focusing attention more on the resultant human perception of the unabstracted material than the fundamental pitch of each string. Piano tuners that use electronic measurement devices do so taking into consideration the calculative methods and algorithmic heuristics mechanized into these devices, all created towards the goal of approximating the trained observations of a history of piano tuning. Final adjustments are always made in dialogue with, and sometimes in disagreement with, electronic tuning measurement devices. I began by thinking about the analog to digital converter, a device and urge that collects and collates many momentary glimpses in order to positively recreate images of continuity, these images being optimized for transportation and transformation within digital virtual systems. A digital system moves as assortments of incomplete sightings. The analog area is made audible through guides of digitality. I started to think about aliasing, where ghost patterns emerge as the inescapable resonant co-creation between noise of the external and the tempo of insufficiencies in resolution. I started to think about the energy, intensity, waste, and decay of the tap, the pop, the pulse, the glance, the peak, the flash, the note, the datum, the reading, the bang, and then finally the strike, which is where I started to become suspicious about the piano hammer, whose strike allows a relationship of holding by leaving, sustaining by disappearing, mechanisms of multiplicity. One can grasp multiple decaying events when one is not grasping any of them at any singular moment, as long as they remain nearby during the aftermath, with fingertips on the dampers. All abstraction can be thought of as a type of compression. To compress is to apply force towards a minimization of form. The compressed form appears as a less than, while promising nothing is lost. How is loss averted? It is not. Compression works by defining the so-called nothing. In compression, nothing is lost. So, of course, abstraction is a distortion. Distortion is a process which transfers something that is true to something that is not that true. The analog is sometimes said to always remain the truth between Boolean truths. The digital is said to be a reduction, a naming, thus a grasp of the truth. There are many reasons to look into the piano in order to unravel technology and computation in general. Like the personal computer, the piano exists as a claim to bring an array of standardized orthogonal powers to the fingertips, combinational functionality, consumption to a degree of social sophistication that it becomes a form of cultural production. Like a personal computer, it also exists as a continuous threat of degradation, demanding non-stop connectivity with structures of specialized labors of adjustment and calibration in order to maintain its idiosyncratic persona functionality. Just like the machine learning model is sometimes said to do or say something, it can also be described as a software-based method for mimicking patterns of quantitative products of which are the result of large-scale mobilizations of social technical labors. So is the response to claim that machines are simply always the reflections of raw human will, in the form of direct acts of design or establishment of coercive socio-economic limitations? Latour quotes Alan Turing's extension of Ada Lovelace's theorization of machinic limitations by contrasting the image of the fatal neutron, injected into the critically cataclysmic atomic pile, with the humble occurrence of the piano hammer striking the string that is then immediately destined towards a decay towards silence. One could also see the taut metal wire of an iron-cast harp, perpetually writhing towards slackness but repeatedly thwarted by the collective pull of its neighbors on the iron frame, suddenly invigorated by the short embrace of the pliable yet firm pillow of the felt on the piano hammer head at the end of a thin rod of wood, bent by the technician's hands during the window of uncertainty created by the head of an alcohol lamp, aimed to fly from the kick of the foot of the jack, a small L-shaped piece of wood that lunges at the hammer only to be restrained by the let-off button, whose length is set as one of the many attempts to materialize the desires emanating from the technician's question, well, what do you want it to sound like? A question that begins a temporary messy dialogue between a container of technologies everlastingly binded with celebrations of violence and appropriations towards declarations of survival, and its two maintainers for that hour, the piano tuner and the piano player. The cataclysmic pile is frequently spread out too far to fit on a single keyboard. Loser.io is a pair of GitHub repos with a website linking to an account on medium.com with uncurated notes towards drafts towards a hope of eventually making some oblique blog posts. The New York School of Piano Tuning Service and Repair announced indefinite cancellation of the semester on March 31st. An optimistic reading of this project is that it could be said to resemble scaffolding for the original project. Invoking the concept of the scaffold in the GitHub age of software development is fitting despite it being frustrating. popular type of utility for programmers is said to generate code scaffolding, structures of empty folders and lightly decorated text files of code that are then said to be left in a state of neutrality, ready at hand for the actual work to be done. These computer folder generators in a strange way embody fantasies of the techno-optimist that one can make a neutral tool that automates, and that automation quickly and effortlessly does something repetitious efficiently, where the result is something utterly open to ethical direction, to moral dominion, standing neutral reserve, a flattened, accessible index of individualized tools and powers, ready to hand for the combinatorial performance of invention, innovation, idealization of hyper-rational utopias. But of course the names and shapes of these folders come from conventions, sometimes specific to the communities around the tools being used, to patterns in history of programming, or the firm's single-handed decisions of the utilities author. As Jeffrey Bacher and Susan Leigh Starr write, we have a moral and ethical agenda in our querying of these systems. Each standard in each category valorizes some point of view and silences another. This is not inherently a bad thing. Indeed, it is inescapable, but it is an ethical choice, and as such it is dangerous. Not bad, but dangerous. Loser.io began with the pessimistic assumption that a so-called good technology is not possible, and the so-called bad technology is as inevitable as the cosmological material realities of the societies that are said to host it, as agents of exacerbation, not essentially transformation. But exacerbation of society is an inevitability of society. It is not that technology is unavoidable, it is that it begins from somewhere that is unavoidable. Is there a path to coming to terms with this? Bringing along this curse without allowing it to destroy the egalitarian societies we need and desire? Loser.io was never a project ambitious enough to answer this question. Instead, it was an attempt to achieve one possible tap on it.